The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Naira Bets handicapping session for the Del Mar Meet opening day and beyond. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, and very excited to be talking Del Mar with two people who have some special knowledge about it that I know they're eager to share with you. Our first guest, actually both of our guests you know from a variety of media, mainly work they've done on both network television and in print and online for the Daily Racing Form. Our first guest covers the Southern California circuit plus the Triple Crown. He's a six-time winner of the Red Smith Award. He's Jay Privman. Jay, welcome back to DRF.com TV. How are you doing?
Good, Pete. Looking forward to Del Mar starting. It's a home game for me.
Yeah, we love that. And then our other TV guy rose to fame as part of the cast of the Horse Players TV show. Since then, he's thrived not only in his own contest play, but as the player development handicapper for Daily Racing Form. You know him from DRF TV, the networks, and his eponymous show and podcast, The Matt Bernier Show. He is, of course, Matt Bernier. Matt, how are you?
Good, Pete. Looking forward to chopping up a little bit of Del Mar opening day.
Excellent. Before we talk about the specifics of opening day, I want to spend some time talking about the meet in general. Matt, we'll start with you. Are there any particular handicapping angles that you look for at the Del Mar meet?
Well, I think you've always got to keep in mind Southern California. Speed is always going to be advantageous more often than not. But I caught the very tail end of you and Jay right before we came on discussing something, and it's the thing that I'm most curious to see what we're going to end up getting out of it with the added banking at the racetrack. And now it seems to be more on par with Santa Anita as far as those sort of things are concerned, but I'm sure Jay has much more as far as details are concerned. That's probably the one thing that I'm most fascinated to see. Does anything fundamentally change from the way this track has played over the past year or two?
Well, let's send that one right to you, Jay. First of all, what do you know about the way that the racing surface has changed, and what would be your hypothesis about how that might change things?
So the way it's changed is, as Matt was referencing, there's been added banking to the turns and even in the stretch too. But it'll obviously be most important on the turns because it should help horses who are rallying wide from not being carried as wide or losing as much ground or having that be as disadvantageous as it would be if it was a completely flat surface. So I think that's one thing that is different. Well, I know that's one thing that's different from the surface from a year ago. Also, just from having walked on the track the last 3 mornings since training opened, I can tell you that it seems like there's more dirt in it or clay as opposed to sand. So I don't think I think it's going to be a quicker surface overall than in years past. That's just the hypothesis I have going in. And obviously, as handicappers, what we'll have to do is be smart enough to watch, not overreact to whatever happens in the double on Wednesday and think that that's what's going to play out for the rest of the 7 weeks. But I think you kind of need to go to school on some of the trends and see if there is a change in the track profile. And because of those things that I mentioned, I think there's a chance that could impact the way races are run and certainly the result.
As always, as a horse player, your observation is going to be your best friend. Maybe a little bit reason to make some extra notes about paths, about pace in these early races and see if you can get out ahead of the curve before everybody in the world figures out what's going on with the potentially different main track surface. How about the turf course, Matt? Are there any trends you've noticed in years past that have helped you identify some winners on the Del Mar turf?
Well, the toughest thing, particularly about last summer, was we started off with just the unbelievable rain situation, and it really threw a monkey wrench in so many different things. So I don't know if that's truly how things are going to kind of continue on to play out this year. I would be stunned if we had a situation where we got as much rain as we did at that time. But No, I mean, anything in particular. I just know Santa Anita, again, and that seems to be just the obvious comparison. Santa Anita, boy, when things get really hard, speed can really carry there, going a mile, mile and an eighth, even a mile and a quarter, or even a mile and a half. But it'll be interesting to see, again, in those first few days, like Jay alluded to, don't jump to conclusions right away, but knowing that we're kind of up against it time-wise with these meetings, whether it's Del Mar or Saratoga, you want to try to get ahead of the curve. And I think something like a track profile is maintaining that can go so far and do so much for someone's game. And if you've never done it, I would highly suggest diving into that.
One big difference at Del Mar on the turf as opposed to Santa Anita is the way the turf sprints play out. Jay, do you have any advice in particular for people looking for horses who maybe the 6.5 downhill at Santa Anita didn't agree with them, but maybe we'll have a little bit more of a chance at the 5 at Del Mar?
A couple things. First off, one thing I think you have to recognize as a handicapper what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And I'm clueless when it comes to the turf sprints at Del Mar. I always try and buy as many as I can. I find them to be very difficult races to handicap. The things that I've tended to notice are that horses that have run well on the course in the past at that trip are always worth using, and that it's harder for turnbacks. Horses that maybe were good at a mile at Santa Anita seem to really run well down that 6.5 furlong hill at Santa Anita. But the 5 furlong trip at Del Mar is often way too abrupt for them. And so those are some things that I look at. But I find the races still, even with knowing those couple of things, I still end up having to use like 3 or 4 a race in a 9-horse field just to feel comfortable in sequential wagers.
It makes sense. Going to take a little break here to give a word from our sponsor before we talk a little bit more generally about what's going on at the Del Mar meet. Then later in the show, we're going to delve into the opening day card. Want to let everyone know about the $200 bet and get sign up bonus. Bet the action right from home by opening a Naira Bets wagering account. Sign up today and you can earn up to $200 in new member sign-up bonuses. Use the promo code DRF200 to bet 200 and get 200. Also, as a Naira Bets member, you get exclusive access to the Naira Bets Pick 5 offered daily on the late Pick 5 at Saratoga. Naira Bets is available to horse players nationwide, so go to NairaBets.com and enter promo code DRF200 to instantly qualify for the Bet 200, Get 200 sign-up promotion. Naira Bets, racing's best play. My next question for you guys, and I'll throw it to Matt for starters. Are there any human angles in terms of trainers or jockeys even that you look for at the Del Mar meet or that you've had success with in the past that you might want to pass along to our viewers today?
I don't know about the past, but in case you've been living under a rock, anything Baffert touches right now turns to gold. So I would just, even if gold trainers that can pop up, you get people shipping in from everywhere. Generally, you get some people from Northern California, but I suppose the only other thing I would throw out there, and this goes back to the opening few days of last year's meeting, keep an eye on those first 2 or 3 cards for outfits that maybe you've never heard of, or they are based in Northern California, because they'll ship in and maybe on paper they don't look like they necessarily belong, but they can come and pop at a big number. I remember we had a number of horses, at least 1 or 2 that came from Los Alamitos last year, and not the afternoon, came from the night races and ran well. And then you also had a couple from up at Golden Gate in the fair circuit that came down and ran very well toward the opening. Those would be the only things I would throw out there.
Jay, how about you in terms of people to watch? And feel free to start discussing specific trainers with 2-year-olds. I know you've done a ton of work on the subject, and there's an excellent article on DRF.com right now, several excellent articles previewing the meet by Jay that everybody should be checking out as well. But in terms of the humans you have your eye on in particular, who are they?
Well, the one guy who used to be like the automatic point for Del Mar guy who you could just really go to the bank on for about 3 or 4 straight years was Pete Miller, but he's gotten so big now that he's just a factor year round. But what built his business was all the success that he had every summer at Del Mar. because he would just point for the meat and fire. And obviously now he's going to be a contender for leading trainer at every meet that he runs at, but he still has Del Mar as the meet that he's most focused at. The guy from Northern California who is not regularly on the circuit, who I think always has a chance to be very live down here is Billy Morey, who is a very high percentage trainer, usually ships in a pretty good number of horses for the meet here, but only basically comes in for the meet and then goes back to Northern California. A lot of the Northern California guys who used to just ship in for the meet are now pretty solid down here. Obviously, guys like Hollendorf or Miotti, I mean, they've pretty much brought their best horses down here, if not completely relocated. But Billy Morey still is kind of a hit and run kind of guy, and I think is someone who's not usually on the circuit, who's certainly worth following at Del Mar.
I once had a NYRA trainer tell me that a win at Saratoga is worth 3 at Belmont. Do you see that? Do you think there's any of that, Jay, out there in California? Do trainers save horses they think are live to run at Del Mar? Does it mean more to win there, or is it different? Is Saratoga sort of unique in that regard, and the dynamics in California are just a whole different deal?
No, I think it's very analogous. There are, just like at Saratoga, you get more people at Del Mar, more trainers are here. They want to win here. The other thing is at Del Mar, as compared to just the prior 2 weeks, for instance, at Los Alamitos, the purses are significantly higher. So you'll have people who will sit on horses for 2 or 3 weeks and wait for this meet because they're going to be running for significantly more money than they would have if they had run at Los Alamitos. So there's very much an element of that, and it's a place to get noticed, just like I was saying with Peter Miller. And I'll tell you a guy whose career just absolutely took off on the East Coast 10 years ago that people might not remember when it happened then, but they're certainly familiar with him now, is Chad Brown, who had an on-fire meet at Saratoga about 10 years ago, and he only had about 12 horses in his barn. And by the next year, he had 60 horses in his barn, and I think now he's got like 200. So you want to, it can really help someone's career if they do well at Del Mar, analogous to what can happen if you get hot at Saratoga.
It can be a launching pad. And speaking of launching pads to potential racing stardom, there's those 2-year-olds we were talking about before. Who in particular, Jay, do you have your eye on? Or are you really looking forward to? You're really looking forward to see in terms of 2-year-olds at Del Mar?
Well, there's certainly the usual suspects out here. Baffert has a lot of horses. Some have already run, but he's got several to debut. There's a filly. You were talking about this race on Wednesday. The filly he's running Wednesday, just a smidge, can run. I've seen tape of her works. She's very quick out of the gate. She is going to be very live in that spot. He's got a colt that I think is going to run on Saturday, first time named Narrow, who's by Pioneer of the Nile, who might be his best one at this point. He's certainly got others that have like.
Apologies, we're having a couple of technical difficulties here. Hopefully the guys will appear again shortly.
I get it back.
We got it back. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on with our webinar software tonight. We'll fix that in the editing room. But sorry, Jay, we lost you when you were in the middle of telling us about the 2-year-olds there. If you want to just give us a little bit of a wrap before we proceed.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where I left off with you. I know where I left off with me, but where. Had I gotten to just a smidge in the
We were just
race
talking
on
about
Wednesday?
just a smidge, yes.
Okay, so she's very live. I've seen tape of her works. She can run. Baffert's got a colt named Narrow who's going to run on Saturday, who looks like he's got quite a bit of talent. But that Baffert's going to have a lot of good 2-year-olds because he's just got such a deep, well-stocked barn. The 2 people I call attention to for this meet, who I think are going to do well, who aren't usually known for having 2-year-olds ready to go at this meet. One is Richard Mandela. He's got a lot of fillies that look like they have quite a bit of talent, including Varanasi, who runs in this opening day race. But he's got some others that I've seen on tape who I think can run. There's one I'm really interested in who's going to run in the next couple of weeks. And I'm looking through my notepad now because I want to give you her name. Ladybug, her name is. She's a Medaglia d'Oro filly. And he's got several other fillies. And the 2-year-old story that you were referring to that I wrote that's online at drf.com has several other names there of horses of his that look like they can run. And the other guy who looks like he's poised for a potential resurgence at this meet is Brian Coroner, who's been kind of quiet for a few years, especially with 2-year-olds. But Samantha Siegel bought a number of 2-year-olds in training for him earlier this year, and a couple of them have been training really, really well over at Los Alamitos. And you know that sort of Miller and Baffert and Hollendorf are strong with numbers and all, but the couple guys who I think might jump up this meet, Mandela especially, and Coroner. He's got a great R colt named Paddock Pick and a Pioneer of the Nile filly named Taylor and Burton, both of whom should run 2 to 3 weeks into the meet that look like they've got quite a bit of quality.
Taylor and Burton, I love it. A blast from the past name. One of the stories of this meet is certainly going to be the horse that looks like the fastest horse in the world at the moment, Arrogate. Could potentially run at Del Mar 3 times not at the meet, but between now and the end of the year. Matt Bernier, how excited are you about seeing Arrogate at least once, probably twice, at this Del Mar meet? And do you think there's anybody out there who can warm him up?
Well, I mean, look, if anyone doesn't get excited about the thought of watching a horse like Arrogate run, then you're probably just not in the right game, or you're not really a fan. And that's look, diehard gamblers, I get it. You're in it for the cash, but it's hard not to get excited to see a horse like this go out and run. As far as Saturday is concerned, if he does go, which it sounds like all systems are going, I don't think anyone's going to get to him. And I think if he were going to lose, it would be at a mile and 16th. There's nothing more than a tune-up. And I still don't think he's going to lose. We've seen some good horses that he's humbled, and they've gone on to do good things this year, particularly a horse like Gunrunner, who came back. And, I mean, a case can be made that he's one of the top 3 or 4 horses in the world, and he got absolutely buried by Arrogate. So it's just a scenario where I think he's in a league, in a class of his own. And, I mean, I know this sounds just insane to even say this, but considering how fast he's run, he's only run a handful of times as a 4-year-old. I mean, is it really that inconceivable that he could take a step forward as he continues to mature? And if he does that, I mean, is he really going to start running a 130? I don't know, but it's fascinating to think about. And I just think he's in a different, just an entirely different league.
It's fun to imagine that, actually. Jay, what are you seeing and hearing about how Arrogate's doing?
So he's had a strong series of works for his return. He really gave him a hard work last weekend, 6 furlongs and 11 and a good gallop out. Like Baffert told me the other day, I went up to Santa Anita to talk to him the other day about that horse and some of his 2-year-olds. And he said, look, I'm in a position with this horse where the only way this horse runs is if he's going to perform like the Arrogate we know he can perform. He says, I'm not going to take him over there going, well, I hope he does okay today. So all I can say is if and when he shows up, whenever you see him on the track, you expect to see the Arrogate that we've come to expect in all the races like the Travers and the Breeders' Cup and the Pegasus and the Dubai World Cup, because there's no reason, as he said, there's no reason for me to get caught with my pants down by running a horse. So I'm not sure if he's absolutely positively going to run lights out.
That was a great piece, and I really enjoyed the insight into a trainer's mind. Obviously, trainers want the fastest and best horses, but if you think having the fastest and best horses makes a trainer's job easier, think again. It really does sound like Baffert puts an inordinate amount of pressure on himself to make sure that people get to see the real Arrogate, and it sounds like that's exactly what we're going to get when he turns up at this Del Mar meeting, and I know we're all really excited about it. Do either of you have a horse, other than the 2-year-olds we talked about already, other than Arrogate, who you're excited to see at this meet. Now, that you can answer the question in any way. It can be a horse you want to see as a fan. It can be a horse you're excited to bet on, who you've been waiting for. Does any horse leap to the tip of either of your tongues?
I mean, for me, it would be Stellar Wind, who I think has a chance to be the best of that division if she's not already right now. She just seems to have improved from last year to this year, and she was plenty good last year. She beat Beholder a couple of times, and she didn't get her best chance in the Breeders' Cup Distaff when she stumbled at the start, and that race ended up being one of the great races for the ages. And she's going to run in the Clement Hirsch in her next start. So I would say her, and Dre Fong looks like he's going to finally make it back to the races in a couple of weeks. And obviously he's the best sprinter in the country when he's on his game. So, and he hasn't run since the Breeders' Cup. So those would be the two horses that come to mind for me that I'm looking forward to seeing down here.
Matt, anybody to add to that list?
Well, I guess, I understand maybe things didn't go her way in the Kentucky Oaks, but Paradise Woods, I'd like to see what we get out of her. And last I had read, I don't know if it was Jay that filed it or Steve Anderson or someone else, but I believe it was Torrey Pines is what the ideal target was. At this point,
That's
you just
correct.
kind of want, okay, so the Torrey Pines, you just at this point want to find out if she's still, was the Kentucky Oaks just a matter of circumstances that got her beat, or was there something more to it? I still think, the Santa Anita Oaks was arguably the best performance from the 3-year-old period this year, maybe with the exception of Mastery. But I'm very anxious to see her get back and hopefully get back to just that brilliance that she showed us in the Oaks.
It was pretty jaw-dropping stuff, and those are just some of the stars who are going to be featured at this Del Mar meet, which, of course, you can bet via Naira Bets. I want to tell everybody about the 1 million point opening day split. Celebrate opening day at Del Mar with Naira Bets by betting $50 or more on the Del Mar card on opening day, Wednesday, July 19th, and split 1 million points. Win or lose, you split 1 million points. Points will be credited to your account within 48 hours of race day. Naira Bets is available to horse players nationwide. Go to nairabets.com, enter the promo code DRF200 to instantly qualify. So many good things going on at Naira Bets. You can see why people are calling it racing's best play. Let's move on, gentlemen, to talk a little bit about this card on opening day. Normally, we don't spend a ton of time in our handicapping sessions talking about non-winners of 2 lifetime claiming 16,000 races. But I do want to at least pause for a second on the opening race of the meet, because it's the traditional thing at Del Mar to run a 2-turn race. So they start in front of the stands, and you can hear the throng of 40,000 cheering. My first question is a general one. Does this race, because people will see it in the condition book and probably have a pretty good guess that it's going to be the first race of Del Mar, does it annually come up strong for a claimer of this race? What do you think, Matt?
I don't particularly think so. I mean, historically, maybe it has. I'm just looking at the one that we've got here for opening day, and I mean, to me, it feels like this could easily be the kickoff leg of a race at Santa Anita on a Thursday. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's, in my opinion anyway, anything above and beyond what we normally get from a non-winners of 2.
I just remember hearing stories about that at Keeneland back in the day. There'd always be whatever it was, a 10,000 claimer to start the meet. But you'd see people would want to win that race so badly and get their picture taken that you'd see horses worth a lot more. And that was kind of an angle you could use going forward, knowing the race was listed as 10, but it might be worth more.
Well, Pete, in point of fact, that race was not the first race in the condition book. But because it got such a small field, they put it early. The race that was listed in the condition book as what was supposed to be the first race of the meet is the race that's going to be run as the last race.
Oh,
but
interesting.
It's being run as the last race because it got such a big field.
Oh.
That 16 claimer going a flat mile was in the book as the first race of the meet, but the field size determined where it was positioned on the card, and that's why that race is instead being run as the last race rather than the first.
Oh, that's great intel and makes sense. So maybe that angle applies for the nightcap as opposed to the opener this year at Del Mar. Rather than go through the entire card, in the early part of the card, we do have a bunch of short fields. Maybe we'll attack it this way. I'll talk to you guys about a race. You can each pick a race or a sequence even that you're excited about playing on this card, and then we can share thoughts on that. Matt, we'll start with you. Is there a particular place you're looking to sink your teeth into on this Del Mar opening day card?
Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about the ocean side here in a little bit, but there were a couple of just individual spots where I thought maybe you could get a little bit cute, and then on the flip side, I thought there were a couple of races that just looked very, very formful. If you're looking for a race that maybe is a little bit, if you want to take a shot in there anyway, how about the third race? It's the first turf race of the meeting. It's for Calabreds. It's an allowance race, mile on the 16th. I don't know that there's a ton of speed, but I think the 8 plane wrap and the 5 accountability, they're going to ensure that there is an honest pace. And there's a little bit of a peculiar horse in here, the 3 Popular Kid for Keith DeSormo, first time gelding. DeSormo's only had this horse one time, and he started him going down the hill. This was after a claim from Charles Stutz. Now, the Charlie Stutz to Keith DeSormo angle, for me, is just enormous, and I happen to pick and bet this horse this day going down the hill. Yeah, the field has come back decent enough, but the important piece was as fast as they went early on, Popular Kid really never had any chance to really find his stride down the lane. He was in behind horses, and he still was only beaten by a length and 3/4. Now, stretching out to a mile and a 16th, there's no guarantee that he's going to be able to do that. But when you look at just the overall body of work for many of the others in this field, whether it's a horse like Over Par, who has much better speed figures, but I don't trust him as far as I could throw him, 7 times second or third from 17 lifetime. And, I suppose a horse like Alsatian is interesting, a little bit lightly raced and could move forward. But if you're looking for a little bit of a kind of an oddball, how about the 3 Popular Kid in the third race?
I like it. I like that as a spot play. Jay, is there a race in particular you'd want to start with? We can go a little more into depth on that fifth, or if you have a race with an angle that's somewhat random that you want to make sure we mention, we could go to that instead.
That's funny. I hope Matt's right, because I actually really like Popular Kid in that spot. The trainer change is enormous, and the horse had a couple of trips in his 2-turn grass races when he was, been with his previous trainer, and he had some bad draws in a couple of those races. I just think, he's going to get his best chance yet in that race, and being gelded for the first time and all that kind of stuff. I guess the sequence that for me is fairly appealing is the pick 3 on 5, 6, and 7, where I'm going to use a couple of those newcomers that I think can run, Varanasi and just a smidge. There's a couple other firsts in here who I'm not quite as interested in. So they're the one, and maybe I'd use Typhosha just because one thing I like to protect with in races like that is, even though you think there's a couple of first timers that look like they're the best ones, experience really counts for a lot with these horses. And so I always, if there's a 2-year-old who's run once and at least showed some ability, and certainly Typhosha qualifies, the race that she comes out of was won by a horse who's obviously got ability. So I would probably maybe go 3 deep there, and then look to come back in the 6th race with horses like Family Meeting and Frenzified, who I just think are the best horses in this spot. And then, Frenzified is coming off of a lengthy layoff, but she's run well on this course, and I think this is a fairly significant drop in class for her. And Gonzalez has won on her before, so I think this is a much more appealing spot for her. And then you go down to the 7th race to finish out this sequence. And some of the horses that I preferred in here, most notably, is Absolutely Stylish, who's coming off of a layoff but has worked very, very well for Truman. And I thought ran a big race winning. And I think this horse can sit. There's a lot of speed in this race. And I think that this horse can sit and finish. And the other horse who I'm interested in is Giant Expectations, who they could have left on the East Coast. He's a New York bred. He obviously did very well back there, and maybe you could argue that they should have left him back there to stay in New York breds and work his way into New York bred stakes competition. But I think he's a better horse now than he was then, and they're the two that I'm most interested in. And like I said, there's a lot of pace in here, and I just want horses who maybe can sit just slightly off of it and finish. And I think those two can get those kinds of trips.
For those taking notes, that's a couple of votes in race 3 for number 3, Popular Kid. And then in race 6, Jay mentioned the 3 and the 6. And in race 7, the 7 and the 9. If you have any questions about anything that anybody said during this handicapping session, it will be archived via drf.com/YouTube. So you'll have an opportunity to go back and re-listen to anything you missed or share it with any of your horse player friends who might not have been able to join us live. Let's go back to the 5th race for a second. I just had some general questions for you, Jay, about these 2-year-old races. You mentioned how experience can be the benefit sometimes. What would you say, generally speaking, in the 2-year-old races at Del Mar? How much signal is there as opposed to noise in what you see on the tote board? How meaningful is money in these races?
It obviously can make a difference when you see it. But there's so many people here who are clocking in the morning, who have good opinions that, it's not often that a horse slips through the cracks. Now, they can, and there certainly have been boxcar winners. But a lot of times, it seems to me it's on days when the track maybe has a profile that ends up helping a horse that just happened to be out there and won. There's not a lot of secrets around here when it comes to the 2-year-olds, especially the ones that have been training at Santa Anita, less so the ones at Los Alamitos and San Luis Rey. But once you get into the meat here and horses are training regularly at Del Mar, it's hard to maybe put one over in the straight maiden ranks. Now there might be horses in the maiden claiming ranks that guys can put one over on, but there's a lot of eyes out here in the mornings.
And folks will have a little more insight into that this year with the ability to get a DRF Clockers report for Del Mar. You can check out drf.com for details on that, but there can sometimes be a lot of valuable information in there that can help you navigate these races. I love that point you made, Jay, about when the track profile is a little weird, sometimes that is what leads to the really crazy prices. You definitely, tell me, Matt, if you agree with this. It does seem like when you're looking at long shots, a slightly disproportionate amount of long shots come either from unexpected wire jobs or races with a lot of speed where the pace just collapse. Do you agree with that concept, and how would you apply that to your maiden handicapping at a place like Del Mar?
Yeah, 100%. I kind of feel like if you're ever going to get just some sort of giant price, it's either going to be a scenario like Jay laid out where one day just the track is tilted one way or the other, whether it's speed friendly or it's just impossible to wire a field, and you get somebody coming from out of the clouds, or they take them gate to wire. I think another thing too, that at least I always fall back on, and maybe it's to a fault, but even in like this race number 5, I'm just always, even with these big outfits that do so well with first time starters, I'm always going to be a little bit more lenient or look a little bit more toward horses with some sort of experience. So I am automatically, I'm going to give Typhosha and Fracas a little bit of extra credit simply because they've at least gone out in the afternoon as opposed to all these other firsters. Now, that doesn't mean that the first time starters aren't likely win candidates, particularly a horse like Just a Smidge. But, I think there is something to that. And I think that kind of goes back, Pete, a little bit to what you were saying. Maybe there is a scenario where you get a horse that first out of the box showed some speed early, faded, and ended up, making it up, finishing 7th, beaten by 20 lengths, and it looks terrible on paper. Well, I've found in the past anyway that you get them out second time. Now they know what's going on. They've got the bottom, so to speak, if you're going to bottom at 5/8, but they kind of know what their job is now, and they have at least a little bit of a puncher's chance. And with all these firsters, they're going to get bet. That with these Barnes, Hollendorfer, and Baffert, and Miller, and so. I think those are interesting ones to take a look at a bit of a middling or longer price.
It's another fun thing you can try to do with these maiden races, especially if you happen to be at Del Mar in person, based similar to what Matt was saying about how they figure it out. Sometimes you can see them figuring it out, the way they run through the lane and even on the gallop out. And that's another fun thing you can use a program like Formulator to make notes about and hopefully try to catch some of these horses who the first running line doesn't look that much on paper, but you have reason to believe they could improve that figure 10, even 20 points sometimes. I want to tell everybody about the $250,000 point all split five every day in race 5 at Del Mar. Split, 250,000 points just for placing a $10 base exacta bet. Win or lose, you split 250,000 points each and every race day. With NYRA Bets, you simply win more, plain and simple. NYRA Bets, available to horse players nationwide. Go to nyrabets.com and enter promo code DRF200 to instantly qualify for that Bet 200, Get 200 sign-up promotion as well. NYRA Bets, racing's best play. I want to talk about the late pick 4 on this opening day card. Jay already gave us some thoughts on the 7th race, so Matt, let's keep it with you. Who were you thinking about in this interesting-looking optional claiming 40 first level allowance?
You know, I was impressed with the 5 Gato del Oro. That maiden score in the most recent start. I know it was only 7/8 of a mile, but didn't really have I don't want to say the cleanest of starts, but just was a little bit tardy, got a little bit pinched back early, made that sort of quick move up the inside, which I have to be honest, rarely does that sort of thing ever end up working. And Omega Moon was a horse that was bet down to 1-2, loomed up on the outside, and this horse, Gato del Oro, just stayed on. I thought it was quite impressive, all things considered. The 6th place runner, as you can see in the webinar screen there, has already come back to graduate with an 84 buyer. So there's at least something to give you the idea that maybe this horse is going to be something, going to be okay. Richard Baltus always does well with these types. I think this is an interesting one, as well as the horse, one of them anyway, that Jay had laid out. Absolutely stylish. I have no knocks against the way that horse broke the maiden most recently. Honor and Courage came back to win next out with an 84 as well. So 5 and 7 would be the ones I'd lean on.
All right, a few different ideas there in race 7, and then we'll continue along with race 8, the traditional opening day feature, the Oceanside. Jay, where are you going in here?
Well, obviously, to me, Bowie's Hero is the horse to beat. He's won over the course before. He ran against much tougher competition in his last start, where he just got absolutely no help from a pace standpoint. They walked early, and he just had no chance the way that race came up. And there's some stretch out speed in here that I think is really going to help his late run. So it's hard to maybe single a horse in a race that has this many runners in it, but he may end up just being an A for me and very little coverage behind him, because I just think he's better than these horses, plain and simple.
If you were to throw in some backups, Jay, even at the C level, what direction would you think about leaning, or have you not even gotten that far yet? It's really just all about the 4 Bowie's Hero at the moment.
Yeah, I haven't sketched it out completely, but ones that I certainly have to respect obviously you've got to respect the inside horse Arms Runner, but he's a horse that needs to prove that he can handle 2 turns, and he's probably going to be the first or at worst second choice in here. And I'd use him, but I'm probably going to use him as a saver type horse, only from the standpoint that, like, if he wins and I get the other 3 races right, I don't want that to be what knocks me out. But I do like Bowie's Hero better. And then Bird is the Word is a horse who he seems to promise a lot more than he delivers. He's just always seems to settle for minor awards. But I guess if I like Bowie's Hero off of his performance against him a couple of runs back in the Singletary, I've got to at least respect him. But I just think Bowie's Hero is better than these horses, and I'm going to be happy to pretty much bank on him, and hopefully I'm right. And if not, it could be a bad late part of the day for me.
You can always play back the late double if it all goes awry.
Exactly. There's always the last two get out races.
Matt, what about you? Are you going to hitch your wagon to Bowie's Hero as well?
I mean, I think he's the most likely winner in the race. Arms runner could be anything, but I don't know as far as distance is concerned. I know he's a half to calculator and all these other things, and he looks visually like he could be very, very good. I don't know that I want him at what figures to be 8 or 9 to 5. Bowie's Hero, let's be honest, even with that electric pace, he had no business winning the Singletary, and he still did. And I kind of look at bird is the word and say, if you couldn't beat Bowie's Hero that day when Bowie's Hero went down to his nose, you're never going to beat him. I think Bowie's Hero is strictly the horse to beat, but I'm guilty of trying to get cute probably too often in certain races, and this is one of them. I find it interesting for a couple of different reasons that the same owners of Arms Runner, the same trainer and whatnot, they also send out the 7 All About Mike. All About Mike is a horse that he's slow on paper, and if you look at him, maybe he looks a little bit cheap. You see, he broke his maiden 2 starts back in the maiden 75. But I like the fact that day he's going down the hill. He went to the front. They didn't go all that fast, considering it's going down the hill. And he won professionally enough. I thought it was good. He went back to his left lead late, but he came back in that 40 starter allowance. And although there wasn't a lot of speed signed on there, he did kind of come to hand for Maldonado in behind horses. And once he finally angled out 4 or 5 pass turning for home, he really finished quite well. There's a part of me that looks at this the way it sets up on paper and says, if you're going to have just, I would imagine, unbelievable speed from Rock and Rudy, I think Arms Runner's going to be close. Pioneer Lad going dirt to turf, I figure he's going to be pretty close. Maybe he's not on the lead, but you've got enough other speed horses in here, Monster Man included from the 13 post. I'd like to think All About Mike can sit in just behind those, even though he is a stretch-out sprinter. He's going to be every bit of the 15 to 1. He's far from the likeliest of win candidates, but I saw enough that he was mildly intriguing to me. And again, I'm trying to get not too far in the weeds as far as looking at the owner and the trainer and everything, but sometimes it's worked for me in the past, and more often than not, it doesn't work. But you know what? If he's going to pay $40, I'm certainly going to have him as an A. So I'm going to use All About Mike as well as Bowie's Hero.
Certainly not going to knock anybody for picking 15 to 1 on the morning line. And there is that old racetrack expression that my friend Frank Scattoni, who does the newcomers seminars out at Del Mar, likes to say about connections. Why enter 2 when 1 would do? So who knows? At a huge price, why not take a little bit of a shot there? Let's move it along to the 9th race. Now we're looking at 2-year-olds again. Jay, you have anything specific you're looking for in here?
I really don't, and that's one of the reasons I'm going to try and stand alone with Bowie's Hero, is because I don't have a good feel for this race. The ones who have run to me are very average. They've not recorded figs that would scare you off, or that would intimidate you in terms of backing a first timer. But none of the first timers in here are horses that I have any insight on that they're super live in here. So I just don't have a good feel at all for this race. And my hope in here is to be as narrow as I can early on and try and pick up a bomber here by spreading as wide as possible and just hoping that something chaotic happens, because I don't have a good feel for this race at all. And maybe Matt's got something smarter, but when Spice Perfection, who's failed twice as a favorite, once at odds on, and whose career best buyer is 49, is the likely favorite, I'm looking for something chaotic to happen.
It does have that look of a chaos race. Could change a little bit maybe if Felony 1 draws in. At least then you'd have a career high buyer of 58 in the mix. Matt Bernier, how are you going to survive and advance in this late pick 4 with this one?
Yeah, I think Felony 1 is interesting if she does draw in. Like you say, you've got that 58 buyer debuted against Stakes Company. I know it was up at Pleasanton, but still, that's an ambitious spot. And you get Lasix for the first time. Of the horses that are in the body, though, I think the 9 Streak of Luck is very interesting. I understand Jay's point that none of the horses that have experience at this point really get you excited. Streak of Luck, at least I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, because the short comment I think is uncharitable and unkind. Steadied early, she was sandwiched pretty bad. She got thrown all the way to the back of the pack. Then she made a bit of a middle move on the far outside, and okay, maybe she flattened out down the lane, but she had a lot of things go against her in that debut. Matt Chu generally not really getting him cranked up for that first time out. I believe he's just under 10%, all things told. And I know his second time starts don't look like they're much better as far as percentages are concerned, but this filly took money in that debut. She was bet down to 4-1. And again, I would suggest anyone go in and watch the replay. I think steadied early is a little bit unkind. I think she got sandwiched pretty good in between horses. So Streak of Luck would be the one of the horses with experience that I would go with. And then after that, I mean, there's not a ton of pedigree in some of these horses. I'm starting to get concerned already about Smiling Tiger. He's 1 for 18 overall with his 2-year-olds. It's probably too early to make a call there one way or the other, but I would go with the 9, and if the 11 draws in, I'll also use Felony 1.
Yeah, that is certainly a negative data point so far on Smiling Tiger, though things can turn around in a hurry, as we've seen before in the past. This will be interesting. It's always a little tough when you're playing a pick four and you have a race like this in the third leg. You got to get a little bit creative in your betting to cover some different possibilities. Let's move it along to the anchor leg, the race that in the condition book was the first race of the meeting. Jay, we'll start with you. How are we going to finish this thing off?
Well, the horse that I like best in here is Preacher Row. He's coming off of a long layoff, but Pipey is very good with this kind of a move. He has a high percentage bringing horses back off lengthy layoffs and a good ROI. But the other thing that intrigued me about him is that there's a rule in California, it's been adopted in other jurisdictions as well, as you know, where if a horse is off for 6 months or more and they come back at the claiming price at which they last raced or a higher price, you can protect them and they're ineligible to be claimed. And they're using that here with Preacher Row. And I always think that when a trainer does that, he's telling you he likes the horse and wants to get a free roll with them. Otherwise, he could just as easily run this horse for 12, 5, or 10 and hope you lose him. So that, to me, just sort of is a reading between the lines thing of a horse who they like how he's doing for his comeback, and they want to use that protection that's afforded by the way they're managing him here. And that, to me, is a significant thing. You know, I don't know what to make of Private Prospect. Obviously, Diodoro wins a high percentage of races at a number of places, and he's shipped in a pretty decent number of horses for here. It's hard for me to get a feel for where this horse fits. He's run it at a number of different racetracks at a number of different class levels. His form is, to me, the one win he's got over the last couple of years is kind of a suspect race, but at least it was a decent enough fig. And then you've got Miller, who's with Belisarius, who's taking a pretty significant class drop. He just looks like he's completely off form, and he's going to try dirt. So he's never run on dirt in his life. He's run in 24 grass races and one race on synthetic. So I'd probably use him as a backup just to protect, because Miller always points to the race, but he looks like a horse that they're trying to lose, whereas Preacher Row looks like a horse that they want to hang on to. And so when I was evaluating the merits of the horses, the management of Preacher Row and the fact that he's had a win at the track before made him the most appealing horse in a race where I'll use him and maybe a couple others as A's and have a couple of backups. Since I'm so slim early on, I can afford that.
I think that's a wise way to approach these claiming races. You can look at the bear form, you can use the bear form, you can use your pace handicapping, but there's also something to be said for trying to walk a mile in the connection's shoes and read the PPs from the back to the front and try to get a sense of where these horses are. And then when you can factor in something like the waiver claim policy, gives you an opportunity to come up with some interesting angles. Matt Bernier, how about you? What do you like in this final race on opening day at Del Mar?
I think it's a bit of a scramble, to be honest with you. I agree with Jay on Preacher Row. I always think anytime the horse comes back with the waiver tag, that to me is just immediately a positive. It's also worth noting that is the same scenario in race number 2 with Pedro Serrano for Peter Miller. Yep. So that's something maybe you want to keep in the back of your mind. Private Prospect, he fits as far as figures are concerned. I don't trust him as far as I could throw him. But at the same time, you know, Diodoro, as Jay alluded to, He's been all over the place as far as class is concerned. He's been all over the place as far as actual racing jurisdictions are concerned. And he shows up here on opening day. I wonder if they're trying to make a bit of a score here as far as, getting out with a winner here. If you're looking for kind of a curious play in here, again, for a race that I thought was just a bit of a scramble, I don't think there's a ton of early speed in here. And I wonder if the 2 anxious times for Mark Glatt is going to show a little bit of early foot stretching out from 7/8 of a mile, showed some speed in that race most recently. You had Alex Rossi come back to win last time out. That was at Los Al last weekend. I just wonder if this is a horse that comes out of this and they look at it and say, you know what, you're going to jump up in class, going to go from the 8 claimer to 16 here. You're going to stretch out in distance. There's not a lot of speed. You get Tyler aboard. I wonder if this is a bit of an interesting one as far as pace is concerned, especially when you look at, I understand he's been overmatched in some of those other claiming levels much higher, 32s and 50s. But I wonder if he's just an interesting one if you're looking at it from a pace standpoint.
All right, lots of good ideas there. I want to bring in another word from our sponsor, Naira Bets, and then I want to go ahead and get to some of the excellent listener questions we have. Cool promotion coming up later in the meet is the Second Chance Pacific Classic promo. Bet 20 or more to win on one horse in the Pac Classic on August 19th. And if your horse finishes second, you get $20 credited back to your account. Only bets placed on your mobile device qualify for the refund. Naira Bets is available to horse players nationwide. Go to nairabets.com and enter promo code DRF200 to instantly qualify for the Bet 200 Get 200 sign-up promotion. Naira Bets, racing's best play. So we've got a bunch of questions. I'll try to filter them as best we can. Somebody had a question about the out-of-state incentive for shippers. Jay, how does that work?
So it's called the Ship and Win program, and the way it works is if you ship in and win, you get $1,500 plus a 30% bonus of the purse. It's not good in stakes races because that would bust the bank pretty quick. But if you've got a claiming horse who comes in, for instance, from out of town, I mean, let's take a look, for instance, at this Diodoro horse in the last race. I mean, he's a horse that is going to basically be running for a 30% premium of the purse money, and that could be an incentive for the drop because it's so hard to figure out what's going on with this horse. I mean, did they bring him here because they want to blow him and make him somebody else's problem, or are they trying to take advantage of the Ship and Win program and run for more money than the purse is? It's a hard read, but that's the way the Ship and Win program is designed in general, is for horses that come in and run in races like that to try and boost that kind of stock.
We had a question come in about Rafael Bejarano. It doesn't appear that he's getting all the good mounts that he used to. What are his prospects for the coming meet at Del Mar? Matt, have you given the Bejarano prospects for the meet any thought?
I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to talk to about jockeys and where I'm concerned about who's riding what. I think the difference between, well, let's take Mike Smith out of it just because he wins everything. But outside of Mike, I don't know that there's a giant difference between. It's similar to Saratoga. It's an all-star meet. You've got all the best riders, and even in Southern California, I know they stick to Santa Anita and Del Mar, but you've got the best of the best that are showing up, and they're going to go out there. I don't think you lose anything if you get, Drayden Van Dyke, or if you get Kent DeSormo, or you get Bejarano, or whoever it may be. I guess directly to Bejarano and who he's riding for and who he's not. I leave that to the people that know more about it than I do, than just to speculate about what's going on and with the jockey agents and whatnot.
Jay, have you heard any scuttlebutt about what's going on with Bejarano's business?
Well, he's in some good barns. I mean, he's riding just a smidge, for instance, for Baffert on opening day. He's riding for Baltus. He's got a number of mounts, so I mean, he's in the right barns to do well. I think it's just a matter of trying to get off to a good start and momentum's going to build for him if he continues to do well. And one of the things that's impacted, there's two riders that have impacted his business overall in terms of not being as dominant, and that's the ascension of Flavien Prat, who's, I think from a day in day out standpoint, is the best rider out here. I'm not counting Mike Smith because he's not a day in day out kind of guy. I'm talking about a guy who's going to ride more than half the card. To me, Pratt's the best rider, and his presence and his good health, because he's been hurt a couple of times in recent years, but lately he's fortunately been in good health, knock on wood. That's impacted business for Bejarano, as has the incredible ascension of Evan Roman, who looked absolutely hopeless when he first started riding in February, and has made as much progress as I've ever seen in all the years I've been doing this over the last 5-6 months as an apprentice rider. And he's in like every good barn. He rides for Hollendorfer, he rides for Baffert. He's in the big barns. He's getting big mounts. And when those things happen, there's a cause and effect relationship, and that's impacted Bejarano's business to some degree.
It's a great answer. Who's your prediction, Jay, for leading rider?
Boy, I would just say probably Roman or Pratt, because they're going to end up riding the most races, and probably Roman. I mean, he's not going to be the leading stake rider, but there's a lot of Thursday and Friday cards here where there's going to be smaller fields, and he's going to be in every race, and some of the other guys aren't going to ride as much. So I think he's got a chance to be leading rider. So I'll say him over Pratt. How's that?
I like it. There's the exacta. Matt, we've had a few questions come in about people very curious about these 2-year-old races. We've talked about some of the factors that can be used when looking at 2-year-old races. For you, what's the most important thing when you're handicapping 2-year-olds?
I think first and foremost, you've got to look at the trainer, and know who really excels first out of the box, second out of the box, especially with, let's just say you've got a horse with a beautiful pedigree, but you've got a trainer that generally doesn't have him cranked up and ready to go first time out. That can be a bit of a trap where they're going to get bet, and maybe they're going to need a race before you actually see them take a step forward. And then also don't totally draw a line through the smaller barns that just show up. And I understand your bigger outfits are going to have the more high priced horses, the more regally bred horses, but that doesn't mean that the smaller outfits can't still fire at first asking. I would just strongly urge people not to just draw a line through certain trainers or certain connections just because, there's 2 Bafferts in here, this horse obviously can't win. Pedigree, I have to be honest, is as important as it is. I think it's, for me anyway, it is slowly going down the totem pole. I think it's interesting to look for maybe some early, sires that really come out of the box and are doing very well, like Jimmy Creed. Jimmy Creed, his first time starters are 4 for 11. He has Varanasi in that the 5th race, I believe it is. So maybe he's one that you want to keep an eye on. And obviously, maybe this isn't really a Del Mar situation, but we talk about, that His Wonderful is up at Saratoga. They're always 2-year-olds and they're always fast. I think you just mainly pay attention to the trainer. I want to know how they're doing as far as their first-time starters, second-time starters, but also, keep an eye on workouts and all those sorts of things. But don't draw a line through smaller outfits just because they're smaller outfits. That doesn't preclude them from winning.
This last question, I really love the question. I'm not sure that either of you are going to have the answer for it, Matt, because you'll be working at the DRF offices in New York, and Jake, because you'll presumably be writing. But somebody wanted to know, where is the best after party for Del Mar opening day? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, my goodness.
I heard there's supposed to be a good one at the Auberge across the street from the track, and another one at the Inn at Rancho Santa Fe inland. Those are supposed to be the 2 better ones. But if you don't have a whole lot of money to throw at a party, there's always a good time at the Del Mar Plaza, and where I think you could just sort of come as you are there, and there's going to be plenty of people. It's hard to miss on opening day, but those, if money is not an object, I would say either the Auberge or the Inn at Rancho Santa Fe are your spots.
Two really sweet spots that I've had the pleasure to go to. I usually just end up at Jimmy O's when I'm lucky enough to be out there, or the the Belly Up if there's a good rock show that night. Always a good notion. Matt, have you been out there for an opening day?
I've been there for one opening day, and it was, I tell you what, if you've never been there for opening day, be prepared. Got to go show up with the right mind frame, because you're going to have people in rough shape at about 3 o'clock. So just be prepared, know that going into it. But I'm looking forward. I haven't been back to Del Mar in about 2 or 3 years now, and I'll be back out for Pacific Classic, so I'm looking forward to that.
Going to be a ton of fun. And of course, you can follow Matt's coverage through DRF TV, through DRF.com, Jay's coverage, DRF.com, and the paper. Going to be a lot of great info on DRF. Naira Bet's going to thank our sponsor again. You can get involved with this Bet 200, Get 200 sign-up bonus. All the details are on NairaBets.com. You're going to want to use that promo code DRF200 to instantly qualify for this promotion. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Naira Bets. Thank you so much to our guests, Jay Privman and Matt Bernier. It was so much fun talking to you guys about one of my favorite race meets of the year, and I hope we get to do it again soon.
No, that was fun. Thanks. And Pete, I hope you get out here. And Maddie, I know you'll be here, and I'll look forward to seeing you.
Yes, sir. Likewise.
Excellent. All right, that's all we got. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. Thanks to all of you for joining us. You've been watching a webinar produced by DRF.com.